What's up, folks? Let's talk about knives. Oh, knives. I haven't bought a knife for work in the better part of 3 years, and here's why. So I used to swoon over knives. This right here was probably my first knife, and I don't have its friend with it. It came in a set of 2 with a Santoku, and it's orange because it's definitely Rachel Ray, no shame. The reason my mom got this for me was because on my birthdays, I would cook for my family. And I didn't want to party, I just wanted to cook for people. So from there I went to culinary school in New York where they gave us a set of knives, but I wanted more. I didn't want to be like everybody else. I think if you look at this knife kit, the only thing that's left remaining from that time as a CIA student is this knife sheath. You see there, and my shitty tape job of red and yellow that all my knife sheaths had to make sure that they were different from everybody else's. While all my friends were playing video games and drinking on the weekends, I would take the train down to Manhattan and stage at places like Le Bernardin and Balloud and where else did they stage? And in all of these kitchens, the cooks all had different knives. They all had different ones. And that's where I went to a place called Corin down in Manhattan, and I picked up this. This was my first nice knife that I kind of got by myself. This is a Misono UX10. I babied this thing. I wouldn't even use this in class. I just basically had it because I didn't want to be the guy to show up at the restaurants that I was staging at with the CIA knife kit. Every single time I was in Manhattan, I would continue to go back to Corin. I wanted to learn more about these knives because knowledge is power when you're making a purchase like that. So the next one that I picked up was this one, the Togiharu Petty, because a lot of the tasks that I was charged with doing in these kitchens were small knife work, brunoise, chiffonade, stuff like that, and it's just a lot more ergonomically sound to use something like that when you're instead of a giant 9.5-inch Misono. And this is right around the time when I started to learn how to sharpen, and I taught myself. And after hours and hours of the sweat putting in the practice and the blood literally bleeding, my fingers would bleed from going up and down the stones over and over again, and there was no tears, I didn't cry. But I started to get a reputation. I became known as the guy who had the sharpest knives in the kitchen. And that's more or less why I wanted to make this video, because I think it's so important. I was at Per Se in New York doing my externship, and there was a guy named Anthony Yang who had a knife very similar to this, similar price point, similar steel. The reason I got this one is because of the sick Masamoto Japanese text on it. I believe it was a Misono 440. Anthony, if you're watching this, when you're not busy doing your super awesome events in San Francisco, you should let me know if you still have that knife in your life. And I really like spending time with Anthony on his station because he actually taught me things. I mean, I was just an extern. He didn't really have to gain shit from teaching me anything. And he taught me one thing that I'm never gonna forget, and that was in response to when he asked where all my friends were doing their externships. And I told him that except for a few, there was almost everybody was doing paid externships at country clubs or hotels or catering companies where they were actually cooking. I mean, and this was coming from me, a guy who was literally living off of his parents still, and when my parents would ask me what I was doing at this great restaurant, I had to tell them that I was cutting tiny cubes and picking herbs because that's what I was doing for free. And what he told me was, yeah, what we do here, it's fucking hard, but that's because we're at the top. And your friends, they're gonna have to work for years to get up to a place like this. But you can always go down and wear chili pepper pants. That story doesn't really have anything to do with knives, I just really like that story. So after Per Se, I had to get a Ninox because it's a Ninox. First I got these 2, the green-handled slicer and the black-handled petty, but now I have 4. I have 2 white-handled ones as well, courtesy of John Miller. That's where I really became obsessed with knife sharpening. I would start to put different angles and change the geometry of all my blades. Some would be 50-50, some would be 70-30, and some I would change just for the heck of it because I just wanted a cool shinogi on it and put angles on that didn't even make sense. After some time in Chicago, then I moved to California and I went to a place called Town Cutler. Shout out to Dylan, who makes these awesome custom sheaths that are made out of leather. He takes a measurement for your knife and then puts a magnet in it so the knife doesn't fall out. No more missing saya pins. And at that shop that was my first introduction into Japanese style knives. I bought a Takeda. And yeah, I know they're kind of catered towards the Western market, a little bit. But after this purchase, I basically learned the law of diminishing returns, which if you don't really know, here. The law of diminishing returns, basically, it's like you have your price down here and your quality here. And as you start here, you kind of go like this. And then, of course, you kind of start to level out a little bit. So as you get kind of towards the top here, you can go up in price, but you're only going to have a marginal increase in quality. So from there I moved to Norway, where I mean, since then I basically haven't bought a knife in the past 3 years. I think this one is the last one that I bought before I moved. It's a Misono carbon butchering knife because I knew I was going to have to be doing some butchering when I was there. I mean, yeah, I went to Japan and I bought some cool ones, and if you've seen my Hong Kong video, I also bought a cleaver there, but those were just souvenirs. I didn't really need them for my job. And this was around the time that I realized that for me and the way that I cook and the way that I treat my knives, I didn't really need a outrageously hard, single-beveled, impeccably handled knife because it was just a tool. And by the way, that's not to say that I don't swoon over knives still. Bloodroot Blades, if you're not following them on Instagram, you're missing out on a lot of really great knife porn. And Aura, the guys out of California, they're doing some really, really geeky stuff with knives, American-made knives. Their Aura 2, for me, is definitely on my list. So it's pulling from both sides, right? Because I always want to have the coolest, most efficient, fastest way to do things, but I also respect that knives are tools and they're a means to an end. So if you're a cook and you're shopping for a new knife, I'd like you to ask yourself if that money is maybe better spent buying a stone and spending some time on YouTube learning how to make the knives you already have better. Or maybe you spend that money for a train or a bus ticket to go stage somewhere, or to take a chef that you admire out for coffee and pick their brain a little bit. Take it from someone who's been there. The price of the knife will make you better, but that's why I love them. I'm Justin Khanna. Have a good one. You know, this knife really isn't that bad. The ergonomics are good, the steel's pretty alright. Maybe I should exclusively use this knife from now on.